So today we're going to talk about how to build a CEO dashboard for your business, how to identify some key KPIs to track, and how to actually manage that within your business. It's one of those areas that my clients, when they first join me, find very hard to get in place. And I can understand that, but the reality is we can make it simpler. So if I can just jump in. Look, a bit about me. The key things for you to understand: I'm a bit of an old fella, 65, had lots of experience as CEO. Largest business was just over 1,100 team members running the international property portfolio of the eldest son of Abu Dhabi, of the ruler of Abu Dhabi, I should say. And the smallest is probably the one I'm running now. So I've set up, when we came back from the Middle East, my wife and I came back with two adopted babies from Ethiopia, and I've built what I call a lifestyle business where it's myself and a small admin team, and I spend my time mentoring, coaching, and consulting to business owners and CEOs of private companies. Been a director of both public companies, private companies, a superannuation fund, and also a couple of charities. And in a past life, I was a senior executive in, as you can see, a number of significant Australian companies. Enough about me. What do I mentor and coach on? I talk about, and all of everything I'm focused on is predominantly helping business owners of private businesses position themselves for an exit. Now, that could be, when I talk about an exit, that could be not being hands-on day to day, minute by minute in the management of the business, free up the owner to focus on their unique abilities, the things they love doing and the things they're really good at. Or it could be an exit of sell the business, or it could be passing it down to family, etc. The way I do that, if you look at the triangle model in the middle, more dollars, more time, more fun. One of the critical things I've found over the years I find with my clients, they come to me just burnt out. They're looking for a life with their family, with their friends, with their hobbies, where they can actually get away from work and actually spend time on other things. I wouldn't say work-life balance, but transitioning from an owner-reliant business to a scalable, self-sustaining business. With a CEO, the owner lives better. We do that in three specific areas. Firstly, building a consistent, reliable profit accelerator. Secondly, building a thriving team that acts as owners. And thirdly, a scalable business processes and systems, and building those into the business. And we focus around a number of pillars: strategy and tactics, execution and operations, people and culture, cash, finance, and marketing and sales. I'm going to just run quickly through this. By the way, I should mention, I'm going to send to you a link to this video, to this training when we're completed on YouTube. I'm going to send you the full slide pack, and I'll send you the actual tools. You don't need to take notes, you're going to get the lot. So, what is a CEO dashboard? In my view, it's a group of KPIs for each aspect of the business, the key drivers of the parts of the business. It starts with evergreen metrics: revenue, profit margin, cash collected, revenue per employee, can be a number of others. It has a number, one or two only North Star metrics. I'm going to take you through that. And then for each business area of your business, two or three, no more. We're not looking for huge lists. Key KPIs for marketing, sales, technology, accounting, finance, people and culture, etc. Now, I'm going to send you this spreadsheet, don't forget. What I do want you to focus on here, though, is if you can't measure it, you can't optimize it. If you can't measure it, you can't optimize it. So when we go back to the KPIs, we're not looking for people to come, your leadership team to come along on whatever day your leadership team sync meeting is and say, oh yeah, no, we're going okay. We're actually looking for them to come along and say, we've set the targets together. Here's how we're tracking towards the targets. Okay, so if you can't measure it, we can't optimize it. Best practices for company scorecards. Keep it simple. So many of my clients have come along and they've jumped into Salesforce and they've come up with so many different metrics to measure, and it just becomes unworkable, uncontrollable, and no one really knows what's going on. So keep it simple. Track it weekly. Weekly. Okay. Why? Because at the end of the month, if you haven't actually, if you look to track it at the end of the month, it's too far to gone. If you're off track, you can't bring it back. So weekly, and make it manual. And this is something that really people look at me and say, what? And I said, yeah, and the point I'm making here is that if you make your leaders and yourselves go up and literally in a spreadsheet or on a whiteboard or whatever way you want to do it, mark in how they've gone, what the status is, and comments, it gets in the brain and people start being held accountable. So, first thing, identify the metrics. Okay. It's a hard thing to do. And I'm sure that anybody that's tried to do that on this call know it's really hard. So I'm going to give you a whole document on suggested KPIs for the different areas in the business. Second thing is, who is the owner of the metrics? And then what are we looking to achieve week on week? Thirdly, what's your monthly target? And this is the point I was making. Good is not subjective. We're looking for specific targets. From a sales, a BDM, or an account manager's role, how many real conversations did they have with with your ICP, your ideal client profile, this week? And what was the target? Is it one per day? Well, we're looking for them to achieve one real deep conversation with one of your ideal client profiles every day. That means 5 a week. Okay. When they come on and say, oh no, everything's good, that's not the answer we're looking for. And then the monthly actual and the status. Now, when it comes to, yeah, so when it comes to status, we use red, yellow, green, and sometimes a separate color green, which is like a super green. Your job as the business owner is to turn projects that are red, turn them to yellow, and turn yellow projects to green. That's your job. Okay. Now, what is a red project? A red project is a project that is off track and where there's no plan to get it back on track. Okay. We're off track and there's no plan to get it back on track. A yellow status is where it's off track, but there is a plan to get it back on track, or at least some semblance of a plan. And of course, green is where it's on track. So going back, so remember I said about we wanted, I'll just go back. We want to keep it simple. We want to track it weekly and we want to make it manual. What we're looking to do is that prior to your weekly leadership team sync, which if you're not having one of those, you should be. And if you want an agenda for that and what that would look like, please email me and I'll send that through to you. But we're looking for your leaders to complete, the status for the week prior to the weekly sync meeting. And we're also looking for them to fill in on the right-hand side, the notes. So we're looking for the actual number, the status, red, yellow, green, and the notes. And in those notes should be the plan for what is happening for all the red and yellow. The plan to get it back on track. Does that make sense? Any questions so far? All happy? Great. So, what's a North Star metric? Remember, if you look at the top, you've got the evergreen metrics of revenue, profit margin, cash collected, revenue per employee, etc. And then North Star metrics. So what's a North Star metric? A North Star metric is a single guiding metric that reflects the core value delivered to customers. It aligns around one primary goal, which helps to prioritize impactful work. And it focuses on long-term growth by centering on customer value. Okay. Why do we have one? Unifies the team, guides resources to high impact activities, and simplicity defines what winning looks like in the business. And can you have one? Ideally, you have one, more than one. Ideally, you have one for maximum clarity, but if needed, secondary metrics may track other areas like distinct product lines, that sort of thing. So what do they look like? Here's some examples. A story I was told years ago was about the Mormon church. Now, I'm not religious, but there was a really interesting story about the North Star metric. The Mormon church has a very high-powered board, including at the time the chair or the president and CEO of American Express. And when the board analyzed the North Star metric for the business, for the church and for the business, they came up with a metric of number of baptisms. And if you think what the North Star metrics are all about, it's about giving direction and define success through customer value, driving sustainability. And the number of baptisms makes an enormous amount of sense because it's growing the engaged population of the church. So what do you reckon? Let's think about your businesses now. What do you reckon your North Star metric would be? John, you're looking to expand. What do you reckon? You're on mute.
For us, I guess properties sold or settled, businesses settled, finance deals settled. We're both looking at 3 settlement.
Okay.
We've got 3 avenues there.
Okay. Corinne, are you there? Oh no, actually, we're not sure if we've got Corinne's microphone working. Hey, Matt, do you want to join us and give us an idea what you think your North Star metric is?
Thanks very much, Jonathan. So I've got several different businesses that I'm the group CEO of, and we've all got different evening stars or North Stars. For a food and packaging business, what we track is our sales pipeline. So that's about focusing on sales efforts for our sales reps. We can't control what customers spend with us, but what we can control is the amount of sales calls and activities that each of the sales reps are making themselves. Yep. So it's about their efforts. For our property services business, it's about forward bookings. So just understanding basically the forward bookings for our accommodation and our hotels and apartments, and then we'll know what we're going to earn with really good accuracy about 3 months out. With our tire businesses, it's really about we focus on controlling our stock levels because that assists us with our cash conversion cycles, our working capital and things like that. So we actually focus on making sure that we have our model stock for each of our stores exactly where it should be. And that's probably just a few examples of what we focus on primarily.
That's an eclectic group of companies.
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so I've neglected to give you the workbook. I apologize. I've just pasted the workbook into the chat. So if you just see if you can open that up. Has that come through? Can someone open it? No? Alison not opening? No. Let's try that again. You just coming in again now. Okay. You just someone try opening that, please. Hopefully that will work now. Yeah. Okay, good. So that's the actual workbook you're looking at now. So your North Star metrics can be around customer growth, it can be around revenue, customer retention, customer engagement, operational efficiency, product or service quality, team performance. It's in my case, it's all about how long clients stay with me and how long they're actively engaged. I've got one client who's now been with me for 10 years. I've got my average client lifetime value of a client is a minimum 3 years, and that's one I track and keep an eye on. Obviously, that leads to the client satisfaction. So I'm now jumping ahead. How do you identify the key KPIs? And this is a really hard one. And normally when my clients come to me, this is something they find very difficult and very hard to identify. So I designed a tool. What you'll find with me, I work on a theory of R&D, rip off and duplicate. So when I see a really good idea or a really good tool or a really good paper or something, I will rip off and duplicate and adapt it as I see fit, but I'll always tell you where it came from. So this one, the idea behind this one came from a fellow by the name of Dave Bainey. He's another CEO coach I have a feeling he's out of Mississippi in the US, and he wrote a really good book called The 3x5 Coach, and it's only about 50 pages. And he talked about this concept of your top right, which I've adapted into my mentoring everywhere. So if you look at that top right, and sorry, I'm going to relate it to another concept of unique ability. So unique ability is what are you really good at and what are you really passionate about? Because in the perfect world, you would focus on what you're passionate about and what you're really good at, and you wouldn't do anything else. And so in my business, I'm in a stage of life where I built a lifestyle business. I've got two adopted children who are 10 and 11. They're the apple of my eye. I want to be able to take significant holidays with them for school holidays. I want to be able to build memories with them. Most rarely will you get a meeting with me before 9:30 in the morning because I get them out of bed and I scream at them a little bit and get them to have breakfast and have their showers and make their lunch. And in the case of my daughter, she loves driving her to school and having a chat. Early mornings don't work for me for meetings. When it comes to the afternoons, my goal is the kids don't have to carry keys for the house. So at 3:25, starting back next week when they finally go back to school, I'll be here every day for when they come home, have a chat with them and settle them down, and then I'll go back to work again. That's my ideal business. So now how does that work from unique ability? What am I really good at? I'm really good at putting tools like this together. I'm really good at finding fabulous material to help one-page tools and short concepts to help business owners and CEOs grow their business and scale their business and build a business where they can work on the unique abilities. I'm really good at what I do now and sharing knowledge. I'm really good at mentoring. But I tell you what I'm not good at. I'm not good at managing my inbox. I'm not good at boring admin stuff. So I have a series of team members. I've got a new girl who started this week who hopefully has replied to you all on the emails and got you booked in here, etc. Her name, God help us, is Princess. I have another VA who does video editing for my podcast. I have bookkeepers, and they're all over the world, these people. So my unique ability, I focus on that and delegate the rest. Now, how do I work out what I should be working on apart from the unique ability? It's this top right tool. Where should I be spending, or where should you be spending most of your time? What are the 3 to 5 responsibilities that you must focus on for your role function, and where you should be spending 60 to 80% of your time and effort? What are the 3 to 5 reasons a person holding the position gets paid for in order of most to least important? Now, if you think about that when you're working out KPIs for your leadership team, and anybody in the business for that matter, what are the 3 to 5 key reasons someone gets paid for being in this role? That directs you, as long as you've got your org chart, your functional org chart, that directs you to help design KPIs. Does that make sense? Any questions on this?
Is this the Eisenhower matrix, more or less?
It's not. The Eisenhower matrix is a time management tool. So if you think about it, Eisenhower, the top right there is what's most important but not urgent. Top left is what's important and urgent. And then down below is what do you delegate and what do you not do at all. It's a similar model when it comes to the 4-quadrant matrix. And if you look at it on the bottom variable here is time, and the left-hand variable is value impact results.
Yeah, thanks, Jonathan.
Okay, so if you look at the bottom, high time, low value impact results, that's where you should spend none of your time. That's where everything should be delegated or just not done. I spent 4 hours with a client's leadership team yesterday, and we were talking about a future org chart, and it's another concept I mentor my clients on, which is looking out 6, 12 months, 2 years, 3 years. What is your org chart? What does the people strategy need to be to match your actual strategy? And I challenged the leadership team yesterday, what is it you're not going to do? Because so often we get your team members and your leaders and you doing things that you just shouldn't be doing and are not productive for you or the business and are really irritating. So the different metrics here, on the left-hand side, high value, low time, lower priority areas that could be delegated, where you should spend some of your time, perhaps training and delegating more and leading others and let others do the work rather than you specifically doing the work, if that makes sense. So if we go back to the unique ability piece and me, what I'm doing here is definitely my top. It's a fascinating thing how in my business, and Alison, you might relate to this, how I generate clients. I have people who've been, I'm going to jokingly say spamming, but yeah, I've been sending educational content for 3 years and suddenly I get a phone call out of the blue of someone I've never heard of, but they're in my database and say, look, I've been following you for 3 years and yeah, I'd like to talk to you about being a client. This whole teaching content, adding value, letting people know my personality, etc., is one of my key top rights, if that makes sense. Okay, in the pack, this is a fillable it's a fillable PDF. So you'll actually be able to type in here, or if you punch onto his handwriting, look at what you do. And I've got another tool, if anybody would like it, an activity audit of where you can actually go and audit everything you do and add a priority, actually a little bit like the Eisenhower matrix, Matt, to work out what you should be delegating, what you should be stopping. So if anybody's interested in that, just let me know. I'll probably put that into an email for you in the next week or so. Leading versus lagging KPIs. This actually doesn't work with this slide, but the concept is the leading is looking out the windscreen and the lagging is looking in the rearview mirror. And this is a point Matt made earlier about salespeople and sales calls. And I talk about this concept of bare ass minimums. What are BAMs? They're non-negotiable minimum standards that are critical for business momentum. These are the essentials that the team must meet consistently. And using Matt's example from a BDM account manager salesperson, the bare ass minimum is how many real calls they did with an ideal client prospect every day or every week. because we know if someone does a real call with an ideal client prospect and it's a good call, that will lead to sales. So the leading is the BAM, the lagging is the actual sales and revenue generated. Yeah. So one of my team's leading, one of the KPIs in my team that we're focusing in on this year is a thing I call brand width, BRAND with WIDTH. It turns out a colleague of mine in the States who's got a big business, he did some research, big in real estate. He did some research that of his clients, and they worked out that to have a potential client do a strategy call with you, that the potential client needed to consume 46 minutes of content. Okay. So think about that. And that could be video, it could be a blog, it could be a short form blog, could be a long form blog, it could be a long form presentation like I'm doing now. It could be an Instagram short. It varies across platforms and it varies across type of content, whether it be written, video, etc. But the concept is, so if last year and before, I put out one blog a week. Now, assuming you are on my database, as against on LinkedIn or Facebook or wherever, and you got the email, and you had time to read the email, you're probably, for those who got it, read it, had time to read it, you're probably consuming 2 to 3 minutes of my content every week. So if you go to the brand width concept of 47 minutes, it's going to take you 25 weeks before you even think about having a call with me. So if you can shrink that, sorry, this is off subject, but it's a really interesting piece of data. If you can shrink the time it takes someone to consume 46 minutes of your content, you can accelerate the sales cycle. From my perspective, what that means from a BAM, a bare ass minimum, is I'm going to be doing one of these a month. And then it goes on YouTube and it'll be cut up into snippets and all sorts of things. I'm going to be doing every week. I'm going to be doing as a bare ass minimum, a podcast interview with a business owner. Every week I'm going to do a 10-minute teaching, which once again, both of those will go up onto YouTube and be promoted as learnings via email, etc. So one of my key marketing piece for this year for my business is all about brand width, and it's all about accelerating business owners deciding to have a strategy call with me. And a strategy call in my terminology is it's not a sales call, it's very much a helping call. So that's my key BAM. Does that make sense? And so with all of your people, we should be looking to have leading and lagging KPIs and bare ass minimums. One of my clients recently, he wanted to step back from the day-to-day and he appointed a general manager, and the general manager, she didn't quite work out. But she also was dual-hatted as a financial controller and neglected the accounts receivable, which blew out to $4 million. Now, that's a bit of a horrendous number if you really think about it. And cash flow terribly affected the business. And when I sat down with my client last week and we actually went through and redefined KPIs for all areas of the business, one of them was accounts receivable, because they're in government, they're working to government, they can actually get paid quickly. So 30 days outstanding is a minimum. And also then an OKR, a quarterly goal, was to drop that 4 million down to a much more manageable number. So the bare ass minimums can work in any area of the business. Okay. Any questions?
Jonathan, whereabouts did you first read about these? Because I've never heard of them before. I think they're absolutely fantastic. And we look at implementing them. I'd probably
Yeah.
change number 2 to set minimums and targets.
Yep.
But yeah, like who developed them? Where are they?
This came from, so with I don't pretend to be the best at everything. And I think I mentioned to you that I mentioned earlier about my unique ability. I'm a big picture type person. So I partner with other consultants at times to help my clients. One of them is uh, I put a sales coach into two of my clients. His name's Steve Jensen. Interesting enough, Steve's expertise, or yeah, where his ICP has been historically gyms, but he's just a brilliant sales coach. He's one of the most anal people I've ever met. And for a sales coach, you actually need a very anal person who's going to keep the sales and business development people online. So he uses the term bare ass minimums. That's the first time I've heard it. And as I said, I R&D, rip off and duplicate, and always tell people where I get it from. So if you'd like an introduction to Steve, he's a fabulous resource map, and he's been with one of my clients for almost 4 years
Okay, fantastic.
and had great results. Classic. One of the things about business owners, entrepreneurs, is we're not necessarily always detailed people. And Steve complements my client really, really well.
Okay. Yeah, no, fantastic. No, I'm a big fan of not reinventing wheels, and I pick and
Yeah.
choose what I think is going to work best with our different teams. Yeah, no, these are great. Thank you, Jonathan.
And if you think about it, this is what you're already doing, because you mentioned earlier on the call about having the set activity targets for your sales team in your
Their targets. So this is probably it's probably communicating a similar message, but just in a different way. It just sets the baseline as opposed to just having a target. So no, this is, hey, to keep your job, you need to do at least this.
Yeah. And that's when you find out whether or not your BDMs or your salespeople are the right people.
Correct.
And it's also about getting the information back from them as to what that conversation was. We're not talking about an email. That's not a conversation.
Correct.
And it's one of the things Steve talks about is he actually has a point system for the sales team. They have to generate 100 points a week. And he's realistic about it in that there are a certain number of points are awarded for travel. If you've got a BDM who's traveling from client to client or state to state, they have their activity can be affected by the territory, as an example. He's got this point system where he allocates, if you're traveling for half a day, that's okay. You'll get 8 points or whatever for the travel, where you'll get 20 points for a real conversation where you can show what the benefits that came out of the conversation. So that's as I said, Matt, if you'd like to have a chat with Steve or have a longer chat about this, I'd be very happy to do.
Appreciate that.
Okay, so example KPI. So this is in the pack in the chat. You know, what KPIs belong on a CEO's KPI dashboard? Now, remembering we're talking about leading and lagging, BAMs and then lagging. I think every leader in the business should have a people KPI. And that is how many and for the CEO particularly, how many A players on the leadership team. Now, what's an A player? An A player is high on productivity in their role and high in living the values of the business. So I apologize if you can hear my dogs barking. I've got some tradies here and they've decided to go mad. So high on living the values of the business and high on productivity in the role. Now, why do I say a minimum, at least 75% of the leadership team to be considered A players? The reason for that is when you hire a new member of the team, they are not going to be fully productive in the role on day one. You're going to have to train them to be productive. And that can take 3, 6, 9, 12 months to do. So you're always going to have an element of the team that are not going to be A players all the time, unless you've got a very stable team. But the key KPI for a CEO or business owner in my mind is how many A players on the leadership team. Because if you've got the right people who are productive and living the values of the business, you don't have to worry about their teams because they're going to do it. They're going to make it happen themselves. And then the same for every leader. they should also have a people target, percentage of A players on the team, and also a marketing development plan. Sorry, a people development plan for everybody in the business. The other thing is, if you have B players or BC players or C players, so a C player is someone who's low on values, within the values, and low on productivity. The reason your best people leave is because you spend all your time looking after the non-performers. So a key criteria when I start an engagement with a client is we work on redeploying C players, low values, low productivity, out of the business as quickly as possible. We then look at BC players. So these are people who are low value, low on living on the values, but high on productivity. These generally tend to be your high performing salespeople who will screw anybody to get the sale. But being such low value, living such low on the values of the business, they are the ones that eventually force the good people out of the business. So one of the keys that's not listed here is the C and BC players, that they over a period of time should not be with the business. And then other things, net cash flow, return on investment, etc. I don't know how much you will use AI. I've been incorporating basic AI, ChatGPT, etc., into the business, into my practice significantly over the last 12 months. And for instance, I sat down with a client last week, the business owner, and we redefined, it's a new client, redefined the KPIs for the leadership team, lock, stock, and barrel, using ChatGPT as a key tool to help. We fed into ChatGPT on a confidential basis what the business is, what it does, what the vision, the owner's vision for the business is, both quantitative and qualitative, what his leader's intent for 3 years is. Then we fed in what the leadership team makeup was, the different functions. We got ChatGPT to draft mission statements for all the roles, including the business owners. Then got ChatGPT to draft out the actual KPIs based on industry standards. Now, we probably got ChatGPT probably got 85% of it right. It was such a time saver. So think about that. If you'd like me to show you how to do that, I'm very happy to do that in a separate session. So in this pack, I've got a whole series of KPIs for example KPIs. As I said, using ChatGPT as an example of Claude is a great way of a bit of brainstorming here. Okay, so all of that is in the pack I provided to you. Might just think. Okay, so really that's the end of my formal presentation. I'm just going to go back to the start though. If we go back here and look at what the dashboard actually looks at, the idea is it's a high level snapshot of your business week by week, month by month, to allow you to see what's working and what's not. Remember I said we're looking for your team members to fill this in manually. It's about keep it simple, fill it in manually with comments. So we're looking for your head of sales as an example. How many of these bare ass minimum calls was your team supposed to do last week, and how many did they do it? And red, yellow, green with a commentary. Now, if I can give you an example of where that went wrong, badly wrong for one of my clients. So this is a company, it's a newish company, 5-6 years, but grown unbelievably. They're over 60 staff now. They're in the technology space. Their revenue is predicted to be about 16, 17 million this year from a standing start 7-8 years ago. So they've done very well. 2 years ago, the CEO went on leave in January, and the CFO went on leave in late January to mid-February. When the CEO got back, they didn't have a dashboard like this in place. When the CEO got back, the key thing he looked at, one of the key things he looked at was the amount of cash in the bank, and he had no cash. And, this in those days it was about 20 staff, so it's a significant business in its own right, even then. And he couldn't work out why. And the reason was that the sales team didn't preload the new year. So what do I mean by that? They hit their sales targets in early November, and they took the foot off the brake. They stopped. They didn't continue sales calls in November and December, and they didn't organise sales calls for January, February. So suddenly his growth just went, wow. And with no sales coming in, all of a sudden he had to put his hand in his pocket to pay the salaries, which was not a nice experience for him to go through. So I'm sure you'll understand. The second year, we got it mostly right, but neglected the engineering. So the sales team has preloaded the year, but the engineering team all decided to go on leave. And so nothing was actually being delivered. And once again, the cash flow tanked. This year, my client was, when he came back from leave in late Jan, was as relaxed as I've ever seen him. Because guess what? The dashboard had been set up so he could track how many BAMs the sales team were doing all the way through November, December, and the future sales calls for January, February. The dashboard had been set up with the BAMs for the engineering team, which included coverage, etc., over the break so they could continue working. And suddenly, using a very basic spreadsheet, the owner of the business was so relaxed in late January and had a good holiday as well. That's how powerful this thing can be. But I do want to emphasize, we're not looking for you to track 60, 70, 80. This is high level, the most important things. And by doing it manually, getting someone, your leader, to fill in the bands, the revenue, etc., by the CFO, the profit margin by the CFO, and then the BAMs in sales as an example, and you can see visually yellow, red, yellow, green, and then comments so you know what the plan is. All of a sudden, it's a weekly snapshot that just keeps your business on track and allows you to lead your business.